Usato is an ugly, disgusting, pathetic high schooler with nothing going on in his life. Bad grades, no friends, no girls, just like you. He wishes he was in a fantasy world to cure his boredom of being an ordinary loser. But one day, someone steals his umbrella, and he decides to wait for the rain to pass because princesses cannot get wet. Suddenly, the student council president Suzune arrives and warns him the school is about to close. Usato takes it as a clue to get his ugly face out of her sight. But Vice President Kazuki appears, the typical perfect dude, and claims that he will let Usato have his spare. They ask if he wants to walk home with them, and he cannot believe he gets the chance to walk with the cool kids. As they walk, Usato tries to give his best shot and asks if they're a couple. The two explain those are just rumors because they spend tons of time together in the student council. Suzune asks if Usato has some plans for the future, but he plans to stay in his mom's basement. Suzune then reveals that she doesn't have any plans either because she accomplishes all her goals pretty fast. She reveals that for that reason, she feels isolated and doesn't think she belongs to this world. Suddenly, Suzune and Kazuki stop. Usato is confused and Kazuki asks if he heard the bell, but Usato doesn't. They hear the bell again, this time even louder. He gets closer when suddenly, a magic circle appears under their feet. Kazuki starts to freak out as Usato claims they're being summoned to another world. Suzune smiles while asking if he means that they will reach a place full of magic, monsters, and heroes. Seconds later, they open their eyes to find themselves inside a strange room with a guy sitting on a throne. The geezer introduces himself as Lloyd, the king of Linger. The geezer explains they have been summoned as heroes and the usual garbage. There's a demon lord who resurrected and is currently raising its armies. The kingdom has been attacked for the past 2 years, but they barely survived. Their last hope was to summon heroes from another world to fight against the demon lord. Kazuki asks them to return them to their world, but the king explains that's not possible. Kazuki continues his Karen mode, mentioning they all have families and stuff. But the king kneels in front of Kazuki, promising to find a way to send them home after the job is done. The mage Welsi reveals that the summoning spell seeks people who have the potential to become heroes. In short, everyone with that potential will hear a bell ringing. Suzune and Kazuki understand that condition, but realize that Usato got here by accident. They then go into Welsi's room to check their magical aptitude. Suzune happily touches a crystal ball and a yellow glow appears. Welsi explains that this means that she can use thunder magic. Kazuki then touches the crystal ball and it turns white. Welsi explains he has a light attribute, which is the strongest attribute because it counters the demon lord. Usato decides to try it too, but there's a flash of green. Suzune and Kazuki think that's a beautiful and calming color, but Welsi freaks out. She grabs Usato's hand and runs back into the throne room. There, she tells the king about Kazuki and Suzune's huge potential. But there is a problem, Usato. The king laughs but gets shocked when he learns the crystal turned green. The king tells Welsi to shut up, making Usato think his attribute is bad. The king starts to plot, mentioning they must take Usato as far away from the castle as possible. The king tells his guards to make preparations, and Usato asks if he's dangerous and if there is someone else with his attribute. The king freaks out as he replies yes, but that person is bad news. Suddenly, a woman walks into the throne room, scaring everyone. This is the person the king was talking about. She asks the king how the summoning ritual went and if the heroes are already there. The king tries to play it cool, but she notices Usato and asks who he is. The king explains he was summoned by mistake along with the heroes. He calls Usato an average pleb, but she clearly notices the king is sweating. She asks for his name and introduces herself as Rose, the captain of the rescue team. Welsi intervenes, mentioning the heroes are waiting by the crystal ball and tells her she will take Rose there. Rose accepts that and prepares to leave. The king feels relieved everything went well, but Usato wants to know what his magic attribute means. He stupidly asks what a green light means. Upon hearing those words, Rose stops. Everyone inside the room starts to freak out. Rose turns back and asks if he just said green. Usato confirms, and she tells the king that she will be taking Usato with her. The king freaks out, and Welsi casts a spell, creating a bubble around Usato and forcing him out of the castle. Yet, Rose dashes outside with her insane speed. Welsi's bubble gets out of the window and tries to take him as far as possible outside the kingdom. However, Rose's speed and power enable her to catch up with him. She then punches the bubble, breaking it. Usato thinks he's done for, yet Rose manages to reach and catch him. She tells the king that she will turn Usato into a proper healer and walks away. Minutes later, Welsi explains to Suzume and Kazuki that Usato was taken. They're worried he might be in danger, but Welsi explains that's not the case because he was taken to the rescue squad. She reveals that Usato's attribute is healing magic. Healers are rare in this world, and Rose is one of them. Welsi continues to explain that Rose will teach Usato everything she knows, but her training methods are unorthodox. After reaching the base, Rose explains Usato has the potential to become a healer. He's pretty confused, and she reveals he will be living here from now on. She then calls the rest of the members, but when Usato looks at them, he realizes they're literally a band of bandits. Rose tells them to take care of Usato, but they all look at him like serial killers. He tries to back away while scared in fear, but the guys introduce themselves, which looks more like a robbery. Rose then explains they all belong to the squad, but are not healers. In fact, her rescue squad has only 2 more healers, but they're stationed somewhere else, which is why she will personally teach him about healing magic. Usato freaks out, his instincts are telling him to scream and run, but he can't move. He tries to ask for another instructor, but she ignores him while saying that training starts tomorrow. The bandit gang smiles at him and tells him how miserable his life will become because Rose will be teaching him. In short, he will be living in hell. The next day, Usato meets Kazuki and Suzume, who are relieved that he's alright. He apologizes for worrying them, but remembers that Rose exists and that she will train him starting today. The two are surprised about this supposed hellish training and ask if he's prepared. Usato confirms, mentioning he has nothing else to do because he wants to be able to help them someday. Rose suddenly steps outside and asks if the heroes are gone. Usato gets scared to return to reality and doesn't reply. Rose then explains he's not in prison and that he can meet his friends when he wants, as long as he isn't training. Usato thanks her, and she gives him a diary to write down his training program, experiences, or whatever he wants. His first day of training was the opposite of hell. In short, his first task was to concentrate and relax. He feels something on his chest, and Rose explains that's magic, and she will teach him how to project it out of his body. After finishing that training, Rose orders him to read a book. Using the images, Rose explains their current location and where the demons live. Since they're close to each other, Linger is the demon's first target. She tells him to read the book as he will learn about the world nations, races, and demons. Usato starts reading it, thinking this training is easy. However, the next couple of days were different as Rose forced him to run until his body couldn't do it anymore. Yet, every time his legs gave up, Rose slapped him with healing magic and ordered him to run again. Usato gets up and runs for his life, but she tells him that even if he dies, she will heal him back to life just to make him run. Usato thinks she's out of her mind, but he decides to vent about it in his diary. On the 6th day, Rose thought he was slow and insulted him. He ends up hugging the floor, and again decides to vent on his diary. However, while trying to get up, he notices that his hand is glowing. He's confused that it looks like healing magic, but doesn't understand why it's activating. Days 8 and 9 were pretty much the same: run into exhaustion, get slapped or kicked, and repeat it for the whole day. However, without noticing, Usato was healing himself every time he got injured. He later realizes that he's using healing magic as second nature, and starts running again without being ordered to. Yet things changed on the 10th day. Since he now knows how to use magic, he can now run without getting tired. However, he still had doubts if he could help Kazuki or Suzume, as he could only run. But Rose added 1,000 push-ups to his training program. Usato knows he cannot do it by himself, that's why he continues to use healing magic to make sure his body can handle it. Rose then reveals she's forcing him to train his body because he needs to run from the enemy on the battlefield and save his fallen comrades. Therefore, the faster he runs, the faster he will be able to save them. Usato is surprised by those words, but she orders him to continue doing push-ups. He continues the training, but is surprised that Rose didn't yell at him. He thinks he should be happy about it, but in reality, he's scared. He quickly got used to this training, and Rose started to add some weights while he ran. On the 21st day, Kazuki and Suzume visit him alongside the princess and a knight. Upon arriving there, they are shocked to see Usato doing push-ups with Rose sitting on a huge rock on top of him. She complains that he's too slow and motivates him to not quit. But our boy grows a pair and says that this is too easy because she's light. Rose then places another rock on top of the other. Despite the initial regret, Usato continues, using his magic to heal himself. Rose even admires his determination, saying that he's becoming her type of guy. The other two cannot believe Usato is going through this, but Suzyum quickly starts drooling after checking his muscles. However, the knight gets angry and grabs Rose's collar, asking why she is trying to destroy Usato. Rose grabs his hand as she tells him that she will use her methods to make Usato become her right-hand man. She claims that Usato is a catch because he hates losing, but what she loves the most is that he doesn't give up. Rose then orders him to take a break and have lunch. While resting under a tree, Usato finds out that the guy is the kingdom's strongest knight, Siglis. He is the one who's teaching Kazuki and Suzyum how to use the sword. Usato finds it impressive. Kazuki then asks if Usato's training has always been as bad as just now. Usato simply replies that today was pretty easy. Suzyum decides to check out our boy's muscles despite him being shy about it. She's all into his huge abs, even the princess cannot contain her curiosity. Kazuki then continues, explaining that he felt like Usato was having a hard time. Usato confirms that he wanted to run in the beginning, but he's fine now because he enjoys training and life here. Suzyum is impressed that he already found a place to belong. He shows his healing magic and explains he also wants to help them. Suzyum uses this chance to flirt, telling him to save her when she needs it. Yet, Usato simply tells her it's too late to act like a normal girl. She gets mad, but even the princess agrees with him. Yet, the next day, Rose gives him a bag and tells him they will head outside. The bandit-looking guys get worried as they realize it's finally time. Usato gets confused, but after some hours, they reach a cliff. Rose reveals that ahead of him, there's a forest called the Darkness of Linger. She then gives him his orders. He can only come home after killing a grand grizzly. Usato tries to refuse it because that's one of the strongest monsters. Plus, he doesn't know how to fight because she only taught him how to run. Yet, Rose gets annoyed and throws him into the forest. While in mid-air, Usato starts to freak because he's on a free fall to death. He then turns around and casts healing magic to survive the impact. Yet, he refuses to die and turns around again, using his healing magic to land safely. He's relieved that he managed to survive and uses his healing magic again to recover from minor injuries. However, he knows that since he's now inside the forest, he must follow Rose's instructions if he wants to go back home. Therefore, he makes his decision to kill a grand grizzly. He claims that's just a 7-foot-tall monster, which is nothing to someone who survived hell. Suddenly, that same bear appears behind him. He starts running away from this chasing bear, who's a lot bigger than he thought. But since his training was basically just running, he knows he can outrun it. He thinks there's no way a bear can catch up with him, but the bear is just behind. He remembers all his training and how he endured that suffering. He thinks the bear is nowhere as scary as Rose and decides to fight it. However, 2 more bear clubs appear behind the big one. Time to hit the hells and outrun all those bears while complaining. He suddenly hears a waterfall nearby and decides to jump inside it. Luckily, he manages to escape those bears and survives. He swims to shore and dries up his clothes. He checks his backpack and sees he only has some rations, a canteen, and a knife. He complains about not having anything to start a fire and calls her a demon. He bites the harder than a brick bread and thinks his mission is impossible. But his situation becomes worse when he hears some wolves. He decides to figure out what he will be doing the next day. He marks day on a tree and falls asleep. He's now prepared for the mission and decides to explore the forest. He keeps marking trees to avoid getting lost and thinks that he should know his enemy first. He's trying to find the grand grizzly's den and walks through the whole forest. He finally gets some clues when he sees some claw marks on a tree. He thinks that's the grand grizzly's claws and it could be nearby. He then suddenly hears some noise from the bushes and pulls out his knife. Turns out it's just a rabbit. He gets confused, thinking it could be a monster, but the rabbit moves forward and collapses. He notices an injury and asks if the rabbit is injured. Usato is surprised because the rabbit shakes his head up and down as if he understood him. He then decides to use his healing magic to cure the rabbit and pats him. He hides behind a tree after telling the rabbit to be careful. However, it seems like the rabbit is following him. He tells the rabbit to go away because it will be dangerous, but the rabbit refuses to. Usato keeps walking away, but the rabbit keeps chasing him. Since the rabbit refuses to stop, Usato asks if he knows where the grand grizzly is. The rabbit starts walking to the side and looks back at him. Usato understands this must mean to follow the rabbit. The rabbit then leads him through the forest, taking Usato to the grand grizzly's den. Usato decides to observe the bear's behavior without being spotted. According to the book he read, grand grizzlies live in groups, which seems to be the case. The rabbit then acts all cute, asking for a pat. Another day has passed, and Usato is unsure if he should fill his canteen with untreated water. However, he doesn't have time to think about it. Suddenly, the rabbit appears and jumps onto his shoulder, surprising Usato. He thought the rabbit went away, but he returned. He thinks this is a strange rabbit and tells him they will observe the bears again. There's no change in behavior, the big one is sleeping again, but the blue ones are starting to look cute. Usato also thinks the rabbit is cute, and this mission somehow is letting him have some fun. However, on the fourth day, Usato feels some stomach aches. He regrets drinking the river water, especially because healing magic doesn't make it better. He compares it to being poisoned and thinks there must be a way to cure it. The rabbit appears once again asking for some pats, and Usato forgets for a moment about his pain. He only recovers on the fifth day, and the rabbit takes him to a small pond. Usato understands this water is safer to drink and notices how it looks cleaner than the river. He gives it a try and says that it even tastes better. The rabbit, however, seems to be scared. Usato wants to know what's wrong, but the rabbit simply starts climbing a tree. Usato is confused and also climbs the tree. He notices the rabbit looking at an empty place. He thinks the rabbit senses a monster approaching, but that's strange because the rabbit wasn't afraid when he saw the grand grizzly. He notices the rabbit shaking in fear, but he then hears some noise. He looks carefully and sees a huge white snake. The rabbit starts to shiver, and Usato wonders what kind of monster that snake is. He never saw that monster in his book. The snake is slithering away, and Usato can feel that this is a monster way stronger than a grand grizzly. He feels an intense bloodlust coming from it and promises to never get near it. For the next few days, Usato was still feeling uneasy, but he kept watching the bears. He thinks their behavior has never changed, and for some reason, he feels calm when looking at them. However, he knows that if he doesn't kill the grand grizzly, he cannot go home. And with that thought, he decides that tomorrow is the day he must do it. Yet, the next day is filled with rain, and the rabbit trying to convince Usato to not go. Usato says that he must do it, but the rabbit keeps trying to pull his leg. Since the weather is an average day in England, he decides to wait until the rain stops. After some hours, the rain finally stops, and Usato grows a pear, promising to make minced meat out of the grand grizzly. The rabbit jumps onto his shoulder, but there's no way Usato will be stopped from heading back home. The rabbit feels sad, but still lets him go. After reaching the bear den, Usato prepares his knife while the rabbit jumps out of his shoulder. Usato then walks into the nest, but he strangely sees 2 of the 3 bears are dead. He wonders what happened and thinks that Rose will kill him because something killed the grand grizzly before him. He looks closely and notices some bite marks. He realizes the one who did it was that huge snake. However, the snake didn't eat them, which means she did it for fun. Usato then hears some noise coming from some rocks and gets startled. Upon looking closely, he sees the small bear coming out. The little bear tries to wake up its mother, to no avail. Upon seeing that, Usato thinks about how he hates about losing. He never wanted to admit defeat to Rose, but his prey was now gone, and his resolve resulted in nothing. The little bear starts crying after realizing he won't play with his mother again, and Usato thinks that he hates to see this stuff the most. He makes up his mind and walks away while promising the small bear that he will take revenge for him. The small bear watches him go, sniffs the floor, and goes in another direction. Meanwhile, Kazuki and Suzume come to visit Usato when they're told that he's been training in the forest for the past 10 days. Kazuki thinks that's a bit too long,
Watch this
but the
next
big guy
video.
reveals
See you
they
on the
cannot
next
go
one.
against her orders. While walking away, Suzume tells Kazuki that he seems fired up when it comes to Usato. He asks if she isn't worried, but she replies that despite her worries, they should trust Usato and Rose. Back in the forest, Usato is making a spear out of a stick and gets his needed calories. After some stretches, he makes up his mind and asks the rabbit to take him to the snake. The rabbit is worried, but he tells it to just take him to the snake and leave. The rabbit starts walking and Usato follows. After a long walk, they manage to find the snake, but Usato sees the little bear trying to fight the snake. Upon looking the snake in the eyes, Usato thinks he's scared, but not as scary as Rose. He charges forward, surprising the little bear. He tries to throw his level 30 spear, but the snake tries to eat his head. He manages to avoid it and stabs its eye. The snake uses its tail to push him against a tree, but he uses his heel to recover and get up. He then pulls out his knife and the snake attacks him. Usato knows he must use the blind spot, which is the right eye, to attack the snake. He dodges the attack and uses his speed to run toward the snake while it recovers. However, the snake uses its tail to attack him. He dodges it, but the smoke cloud allows the snake to bite his arm. He shouts in pain, realizing the snake was biting him. He uses his heel to recover from the pain and uses the bitten arm to stab the knife from inside its mouth. The snake gives up and sets him free. However, Usato starts to feel its poison. He thinks it's not fair, but he knows a way to heal himself from his experience with the river water. If his injury is internal, he must use his heel to recover internally. With that, he recovers and charges again. The snake uses the tail to attack him, but the small bear decides to help and manages to block it. Usato then jumps over the bear and lands on top of the snake's head. He then punches the snake with his healing magic to knock it down and follows up by stabbing its eye again with the spear. The snake tries to resist, but in the end, it gives up and stops moving. Usato lays on the ground and takes some deep breaths, happy that he managed to do it. However, the little bear is staring at him closely. Usato realizes that he will now become the little one's lunch. However, the bear treats him gently and Usato pats it, mentioning that he managed to get revenge for him. He tells the little one that he cannot heal him right now because he uses most of his magic to cure the poison. Yet suddenly, the snake raises again and looks at them. Usato cannot move, and the little one tries to carry him away. However, our boy is heavy. He orders the bear to run away, but the snake lunges to attack them. Usato realizes this is the end and starts cursing Rose. He blames everything on her and calls her an ogre. Suddenly, Rose appears from the air and kicks the snake down. She starts cursing the snake, saying that it should have died when Usato was fighting. Both Usato and the little one are shocked. Usato asks what she is doing here, and she reveals the rabbit called her. Usato is confused, but she explains that the rabbit is her pet Kukuru, who she told to watch over Usato. Usato doesn't believe it because the rabbit was injured when they met each other. Rose then reveals it was all a scam to gain his trust. Rose then explains she was always nearby just in case, but she didn't expect this snake to appear in the forest. Usato asks what this is, and she explains it's a monster modified by the Demon Lord's army. In fact, Siglis wasn't able to defeat the snake in the last Demon Lord's invasion. She doesn't know how the snake managed to beat the Grand Grizzly, especially because the kingdom's elite force can't do it. Usato thinks she's a monster because she told him to do that. Rose reveals she never expected him to win that fight. She just wanted him to get experience. However, things got interesting, and she wanted to see what he would do. He complains that he almost died, and the little bear also comes to defend Usato. Rose notices the little one likes Usato, making him think that the bear lost his parents and is lonely. He pats the bear, and the two act friendly. Rose compliments Usato and tells the bear he will be coming with them, but he has to carry Usato. The bear takes Usato on his back, and Rose grabs the two with one hand and carries them back. She tells Usato that he passed this exam, and now he has the right. He gets confused, but she reveals that despite lacking training, he has the right to stand next to her on the battlefield. She says that he has everything, a body that can withstand pain, physical prowess, and more importantly, an indomitable spirit. That's something that the other healers in her squad lack. She tells him to be proud, and they might still make it back in time. Usato is confused, but she reveals the Demon Lord's army is preparing to attack. Usato is shocked to hear that because another war will break out. Rose confirms and tells him that he will heal the injured on the front lines along her side. This means he will now belong to the advance guard. Usato is shocked and asks what about the rest of their members. Rose explains they only have 2 more healers, but they have different roles. Usato is unsure if he can do the same as Rose, but she replies that they still have some time to make him stronger. Meanwhile, the Demon Lord asks a subordinate Amila about their plan to invade the Linger Kingdom. She confirms that everything is on track, and they're all prepared to advance soon. The Demon Lord is relieved and states that she will be the one commanding their army. He mentions they failed their last invasion and warns her that she should give her all while also avoiding death. She gives him some hope, and he dismisses her. While walking back, another guy noticed Amila was nervous while having the audience with the Demon Lord. She tells him to do his job instead of teasing her and calls him Monster Dr. Kenopin. The guy claims his name is already cute and replies that his job is going pretty great. After all, he managed to complete a new demon-modified monster prototype. He asks if she wants to see it, and she follows him. She then sees a huge snake similar to the one Usato fought before. The demon is hyped out about this monster and reveals its name. Amila, however, mentions that's the same name he used on his last prototype that went missing during their attempt to invade Linger. The guy complains his snake was beaten up by Sigley's and it ran away. However, this new monster is way stronger. Still, Amila couldn't care less because she knows there's someone in Linger who's stronger than Sigley's. The guy gets curious and asks if she's talking about the kidnappers. She confirms, mentioning they never fight, but they're still on the battlefield carrying the wounded back to the rear at some insane speed. The guy thinks they minimize casualties, but Amila explains the kidnapper's boss is a healer who not only has insane healing skills, but is also an excellent fighter. That person is Rose, the strongest person in Linger. Amila deeply hates Rose because Rose fought her master, yet the guy didn't stay alive to tell what happened. This monster tells her to calm down because she cannot fight during their invasion because she must command the army. Yet Amila walks away, mentioning she will leave the fight to their immortal dark magic user. Back to Usato, he's happy because he missed his bed, to the point where he also enjoys Tong's snores. Yet he must wake up and do his stuff. He gives some fruits to the little bear for breakfast and notices Rose's rabbit nearby. However, Usato tells him that he cannot forgive him for taking advantage of his innocence. The rabbit acts cute and Usato almost falls for it. Yet he tries to refuse to be nice to the rabbit, but he cannot resist it. He keeps giving the bear more fruits and calls it Blurin. Rose arrives repeating the same name and she asks if that's its name. Usato confirms it, mentioning he combined the words blue grizzly. Rose is shocked to hear that but focuses on saying that she told the king about the bear and it will now be the property of the rescue squad. Usato is confused about that, and she reveals that the bear must also do his duty if he wants to stay here. The little one is scared with her smile and hides. Turns out that from now on, Usato must not only run with weights, but also carry the bear. Rose explains this will be a regime close to what will happen on the battlefield. She tells him to think of the bear as someone who needs rescue. She orders him to start running, and he follows her orders. In fact, Usato only considers this as a training with more weight than usual. He thinks that all he needs to do is to control his healing magic properly. Yet Rose shouts that he's too slow and the wounded will die. Usato complains but picks up the pace. Suddenly, Tong comes out of a bush and tries to punch him, but Usato avoids it. Another guy comes running into him, but he also dodges. He thinks they're crazy and asks what they are doing. The thugs chase him and explain this is a simulation of what will happen on the battlefield. Usato tries to run faster, but the thugs yell others are hiding too. Yet Usato speeds up and keeps running for the next hour. The others throw some sticky water balloons from trees, forcing Usato to run while holding his breath. Some appear from the ground with wooden swords and try to hit him, but he dodges. After 3 hours of running, another guy cuts a rope to make Usato play Donkey Kong. But in the 4th hour, Usato finally uses his magic but feels strange. The rabbit comes out from a bush and smiles. Yet Usato panics and jumps over him thinking the rabbit is doing it again. With time, Usato feels even stranger and finally collapses without knowing why. Usato is confused because he should at least be able to last for half a day. Rose appears, explaining that will be his stamina on the battlefield. Usato is confused, but she explains the human body also gets fatigued from feelings like anxiety, fear, and frustration. That's the reason why he ran out of energy faster than normal. Usato asks what he can do, but she heals him up and tells him to get used to those emotions. She says he must build up his mental fortitude and situational awareness. She then walks away and orders him to run through the town and around the castle during the afternoon. Usato is confused but follows those orders. Yet, every citizen is shocked to see a guy running in the streets with a blue grizzly on his back. Usato already knew this would happen despite Blurin being a well-behaved monster. Suddenly, the people start smiling as they realize that Usato is also part of the rescue squad. Suddenly, Blurin smells something and wakes up. The bear points forward and Usato stops the buy fruit stall. He doesn't have any money but asks the name of those fruits. The old lady calls it pearls. Usato then asks her why the people aren't freaking out while he carries a monster on his back. The lady replies it's because he's part of the rescue squad. She talks about his uniform and reveals the gang also runs through the city all the time. Usato thinks about it and confirms someone would get used to it after seeing those scary bandits running around. Before he leaves, the lady gives him a pearl and Blurin eats it. As Usato runs away, a little girl asks the old lady if he belongs to the rescue squad. The lady confirms and asks why she wants to know. The girl simply dismisses it and looks at him. Usato then plans to make a quick stop by the castle to visit Suzume and Kazuki. However, a guy notices him pass by and starts running after him. The guy chases him while asking Usato to stop, but he keeps getting behind. Usato only notices when the guy collapses on the floor and asks if he's okay. Usato heals the guy and asks what he wants. The guy reveals he wanted to say hi because he also is part of the rescue squad. Usato is confused, but the guy introduces himself as Fleur, one of the other two healers. After hearing the whole story, Fleur is impressed to know that Usato was summoned by mistake along with the heroes. Usato claims he almost forgot about it because he's been training hard every day. Fleur thinks Usato is amazing for being able to keep up with Rose's training because he and his sister couldn't. Usato asks if she's the other healer. Fleur confirms, mentioning she's 5 years younger and they run a clinic in the castle town to heal people with magic. Yet Usato is confused about why Fleur collapsed just now. Fleur explains he's not good at using healing magic on himself, he can only do it to heal others. Usato is surprised there are other types of healers, and Fleur confirms, mentioning they're all part of the rescue squad. Therefore, when it's needed, they help their captain and heal everyone. Upon hearing those words, Usato remembers when Rose told him that he would go to the front lines and heal the injured by her side. He gets worried and asks Fleur what their roles on the battlefield are. Fleur replies the bandits retrieve the injured from the front lines, while he and his sister heal them. In short, they're the rear support. Yet, Usato reveals that he will be going to the front lines with Rose. Fleur is shocked, and Usato questions if someone like him can do it. Fleur replies the ones in most danger are the heroes and the knights, and if they get injured, they will most likely die. But if they have healers on the front lines, it means those people can be saved. He reveals that's a tough and dangerous job, however. He knows Rose would never bring someone who she didn't completely trust. Usato thinks about his friends and gets worried. Fleur then gets up to return to the clinic, and Usato decides to continue his training. Before departing, Fleur asks Usato to not hate Rose because she doesn't know how to measure her words. Yet Usato tells Fleur to not worry because he never hated her. In fact, he also has some words to tell her. Usato then starts running, and Fleur feels relieved that Rose finally met the person she was looking for. Suddenly, Fleur's sister comes to complain, asking if he has a death wish for wandering around. He tells her that he's not that frail, but her look tells us otherwise. He then tells her that he just met someone interesting, and she gets curious about that person. Yet Fleur replies she will eventually meet and like him. Meanwhile, Usato reaches the castle and asks for permission to enter with the bear. The guard allows him, confusing Usato, who asks how he can bring a monster to the castle. The guy replies that Rose has signed it off, so he should go ahead. Upon reaching the training grounds, Usato watches Suzume practicing against 3 soldiers. She gets distracted when she sees it and asks about the bear. They take a break, and Usato tells her everything about surviving in the forest filled with monsters. Yet, she's way more excited to pet Blurrin. Usato tells her to go ahead, but Blurrin slaps her hand away, refusing her pat. Usato apologizes, saying Blurrin is shy, but she is even more excited. She asks Blurrin to become her friend, but he bites her hand when she tries to pat him. Usato says this could mean Blurrin thinks she's a bad person, but he then bites his hand too. She teases him, but they eventually let it go. Usato then notices the injuries on her hand, and she claims it's because she's training seriously. He then holds her hand and heals it, surprising her with his amazing skill. The girl thinks he came all the way here to visit her and blushes. But Usato confirms he came here to visit her and Kazuki. She feels rejected and reveals Kazuki left the kingdom with Siglis to get some combat experience against monsters. While walking, Kazuki asks Siglis if it's true that the Demon Lord's army will start invading soon. Siglis confirms it, mentioning it will probably have a much stronger army than last time. And that's why they summon Suzume and Kazuki, heroes who can boost their soldiers' morale. Yet Kazuki is still unsure and hesitates. Still, he promises to give his all, but they all stop because there's a pack of hung wolves in front of them. They prepare to battle, and Kazuki makes his resolve. Usato is impressed, but wonders if Kazuki will be okay. Suzume replies it will only last some days, but once he returns, she will be the one performing that training. Usato teases her, mentioning she will probably enjoy every moment of becoming OP in another world. Yet she complains because he's not worried about her at all. After the conversation, Usato decides to continue his training. He thinks about the other two doing their best for the incoming battle and that they're going to fight. And if they do it, he also wants to somehow help and not be the one staying behind to be protected. He thinks that in his previous world, he only wished to do the things he couldn't. However, this is not who he is anymore. After returning home and putting Blurrin to sleep, Usato meets Rose. She asks if his body has already gotten used to the training, and he answers he got a bit used to it. Yet, he wants to train more. Upon hearing those words, Rose tells him to continue and walks away. Usato stops her to ask about her words to steel himself. He explains that he freaked up after almost dying to the snake and then heard about the incoming invasion. He initially thought he didn't want to be a part of this, yet today he changed his mind. He won't fight or kill enemies. However, he will do anything to save everyone because he's a member of the rescue squad. Rose smiles for the first time and bumps her fist into his chest, telling him to have pride in saving people and the values of their squad. Upon hearing those words, Usato smiles and calls her captain. However, the next day, Rose wakes up by putting a heavy back on top of him and tells him the king ordered him to join Suzume's training. On the way, Usato asks Rose why he must join Suzume's training because Kazuki went with Siglis. Rose explains he was supposed to join Kazuki's training as well. However, she refused because he had just returned from the forest. The king later sent another request, to which she couldn't refuse again. She tries to calm him down by mentioning he's only going to act as a healer if needed. She advises him to simply play his part for the next 3 days and return home. They finally arrive at the meeting point and Suzume is happy that Usato will be joining her. She thinks he only brought Blurrin with him to help them bond with each other, yet Usato explains he only brought Blurrin because he hates everyone else. She starts complaining about his lack of empathy and never playing along with her random BS. She then introduces the rest of her group, Aruku the Knight and Korin the Mage. Before leaving, Rose tells Suzume to not be reckless because Usato can only heal wounds and cure poison. If someone dies, they will stay dead. Suzume takes the advice to heart, and Rose thinks she will be fine since she was trained by Siglis. She then turns to Usato and reveals she has no advice for him. He's confused and she approaches him, asking if he has a problem with it. Usato replies he's good and she gets going. Yet, he's suddenly surprised when Suzume talks about how strong Rose is. Yet, she refuses to explain it when asked about it and starts moving. Meanwhile, at the castle, the princess gets worried about Kazuki and asks what he's doing. He explains that he's training his sword skills, but she mentions that he just arrived the day before and was supposed to rest. He dismisses it, explaining he had a great night of sleep and can handle training again. She thinks he's pushing himself too much, but he flexes his muscles to show off he's fine. The princess realizes she's holding his arm and gets shy before walking away. Back at Usato's group, Suzume recounts Kazuki's experience while training. Usato didn't expect Kazuki to be so worn out, but he had told Suzume the experience was worth it. He battled tons of monsters inside the darkness of Linger, and Suzume reveals that's where they're heading to right now. Upon hearing that name, Usato reminds the time he was observing Blurrin and his family. He wonders if Blurrin misses his home, but that moment is interrupted by Suzume, asking if the little bear will wake up soon. She thinks this is the perfect chance to pet the bear since he won't bite her. She tries to do it, but Usato slaps her hand. She initially gets confused but tries to pet the bear several other times, all denied by Usato's slaps. She finally asks what is he doing that, but he replies with the same question. She uses this chance to flirt with him, mentioning he's smacking her hand and talking her down. She thinks he became a sadist, but he has no idea of what she's saying. Blurrin then wakes up, and Usato tells him to walk by himself. But the bear can barely walk straight because he's sleepy. Suzume thinks this is her chance. She tells Blurrin to hop on her back and she will carry him. Usato tries to stop her from doing it, but Blurrin lies on her back. Suzume is happy that she finally touched Blurrin's fluffy fur and tries to get up. However, she falls flat on her face because the bear is too heavy. Usato helps her out and they continue walking as he tells her to not get hurt outside of battle. She thanks him for healing her, but they're forced to stop because the mage senses multiple presences ahead of them. The knight warns them to be prepared to fight monsters, however the mage notices he's wrong. Some bandits appear from the bushes as they cannot ambush anyone who already knows about their presence. The bandits do their usual stuff, threatening them to hand over their goods or else. The knight refuses to, making the bandits mention how big their group is. Usato is confused about what the plot is going on because these guys aren't intimidating at all. He notices Suzyum pulling his shirt, and he tries to be a Chad and reassure her that everything is fine. Still, this crazy girl is excited to see real bandits, mentioning that she has never seen one before. Usato thinks this girl is clearly out of her mind, but Blurin, who was at the back, appears by Usato's side. The bandits start to panic because they never expected someone to tame a blue grizzly. However, one of them tells the others to take a better look because that's just a cub. The rest of the bandits think this is their chance to get a bear and skin it. Usato gets mad at those words, but Suzyum attacks the bandits before he can do anything else. Usato is impressed that she managed to control her power to simply knock the bandit out with lightning. She explains she practiced a lot to make it perfect, and Usato incentivizes her to go wild. The bandits decide to charge forward, thinking that Suzyum cannot use her magic if they get close. Yet Suzyum electrocutes them while they run. Usato is acting like a cheerleader while also calling Suzyum a human stun gun and a human electric eel. Yet suddenly, the mage senses something new. Seconds later, a horde of fall boars pass by them. The knight is confused because these monsters should live deep in the forest. The boards almost hit Usato from the back, but Blurin headbutts them. Suzyum tries to electrocute the rest, but another boar dashes toward her. Usato tries to protect her, but they get hit and are both projected into the air. They start falling deep into the forest, but Usato uses his body to protect her from the fall. He casts healing magic while taking the heavy hits from the tree branches, but they still end up falling into the nearby river. After returning to the water's surface, Usato realizes that's the same river he fell when he came to the forest. He knows there's a waterfall ahead and tells Suzyum to take a deep breath. After falling, Suzyum tries to wake him up and carries him to the shore while mentioning that she will pay this debt. Usato then wakes up, mentioning he's fine and that this is quite embarrassing. She gets all shy and pushes him away after realizing that he woke up. Usato then uses his magic to heal her wound, but Suzyum apologizes for putting him in this situation. He dismisses it, mentioning that he's glad that they at least got into this together. He looks around saying he never expected to return so soon. He then explains that Rose dumped him here to train before, and that this forest is filled with monsters far stronger than those boars. Usato then sits down to check their gear and decide how to move from now on. Suzyum asks if it's not better to escape the forest because of the monsters. Usato reveals it's about to get dark and it might rain, therefore it's better to find a spot to camp and move tomorrow. She asks if he knows about any safe spot. He replies that he slept on a tree branch and asks if she's fine with it. Suzyum mentions she never climbed a tree because she was never allowed to despite wanting it. Usato thinks she came from a wealthy family who sheltered her entire life. Usato then finds a cave and decides to camp there, mentioning that not only it will cover them from rain, but it's also better than going deeper into the forest. He then advises her to get out of her wet clothes, and she shyly tells him to not peek. Yet, after noticing Usato's stupid face, she realizes that he never thought about it. Usato then decides to use Suzyum's lighting abilities to fish and start a fire. He's quite happy about all of this because he didn't have a fire the last time. However, he notices Suzyum on the corner. He apologizes for this awkward situation, but she's more into checking all his muscles from afar. She suddenly looks up and sees some monsters. She gets excited, and Usato calls them venom monkeys, explaining that he read about them. The monkeys get down, and he tells her the monkeys are friendly, but she can get poisoned if she touches them. Yet Suzyum is already touching one. Usato asks what the plot is she doing, but she replies that she has already been poisoned by the monkey's cuteness. She tells him there's nothing to fear, but the small monkey bites her finger. She collapses, forcing Usato to cure her. Meanwhile, at the palace, the king gets informed by the mage's familiar that Usato and Suzyum are missing. Kazuki wants to know more about it, and the king explains all the information he currently has. The king reveals he didn't want to reveal this to Kazuki, but the princess forced him to do. Kazuki asks if they already sent a research party, but the king reveals they will depart tomorrow. Kazuki thinks that's too late and decides to head out by himself right now. However, big gorilla mommy Rose appears and tells him to stop. She tells him to not worry because Usato is with Suzyum. She bluntly explains that Usato won't die so easily, so if Usato is fine, Suzyum should be safe. Kazuki is shocked to hear that, after all, Usato is a random dude who came here by mistake and got healing magic. Talking about the devil, Usato is having an amazing time, thinking it's way easier to survive in the forest with Suzyum by his side. She gets annoyed because he's literally calling her camping equipment, but he dismisses it. She lets it pass, and since he notices that she's tired, he decides they should sleep in turns, starting by her. She rejects it, mentioning that he should sleep first because he used his healing magic on her. He accepts the deal and lies down. While awake, Suzyum looks at Usato and asks if he's asleep. He reveals he's still awake, and she asks how he feels about being summoned to this world. She asks if he thinks about ever returning home. Usato explains that's a tough question because he does want to go home. Yet, he also has a reason to stay in this world. Suzyum then reveals she doesn't want to go back, but is surprised that he didn't ask why. He asks her if he should do it, and she confirms. He reveals that he knows why she doesn't want to go back. It's because she likes this world more than theirs. Suzyum confirms, explaining there's nothing left for her in their world. She's willing to throw away her family, friends, or who she was before, just to stay here. She reveals that she was waiting her entire life for this moment. She calls it a chance to free herself. She feels she's finally free because she has nothing to tie her down in this world. I guess she forgot she's one of the heroes. Yet, she's surprised to hear Usato say that sounds good to him. He doesn't understand her expression, and she asks if he's not disappointed by who she really is. Usato explains he always wanted to change and stop being an ordinary guy who is passive. Therefore, he doesn't think they're different from each other. Suzyum is impressed, but Usato continues. When they arrived, he didn't want to hold them back, and that's why he always accepted Rose's training. But now, he's determined to protect her, Kazuki, and everyone else in this kingdom as a member of the rescue squad. When asked about it, Suzyum replies she also wants to protect this place as a hero. Upon confirming their resolve, Usato says they will save the kingdom together and forget their old world. Suzyum smiles, mentioning that Usato has grown a lot since coming here. Usato also reveals that he feels closer to her. In their world, he always thought about her as a flawless, perfect girl. Yet, Suzyum is shocked because he never treated her as if she was a perfect girl. But she reveals that she doesn't mind it because she'd rather be close to him than be admired from afar. After blushing, Usato decides to hide his face by going to sleep. The next day, they walk through the forest, and Usato tells her to be careful. They hear some noise and prepare for a fight, but turns out to be Blurin, who quickly jumps on top of Usato. The night dude appears, out of breath, and collapses. After recovering, he explains they've been searching for them, but Blurin suddenly started to run away. They followed him, thinking the bear would lead to them, and here they are. Suzyum tells Blurin he did a good job, but the bear is smelling something and walks in a certain direction. He stops at a place and Suzyum asks where they are. Usato explains this was Blurin's home before his parents were killed by a giant snake. Usato feels sad for the little bear, but Blurin comes to him, making them confused. Usato thinks Blurin wants to go, and Suzyum is impressed the bear already made his decision. She explains that Blurin knows that he belongs by Usato's side. Blurin starts walking away, and Suzyum tells Usato it's time to return home. Upon returning, the king welcomes Usato and Suzyum back. Suzyum apologizes for worrying him, but he claims he's the one who must apologize for putting Usato into this. Usato dismisses it and confuses the king by mentioning that he's already used to these types of situations. Our boy quickly realizes he made a mistake and looks at Rose. He tries to explain himself and lies by saying that he used to explore the woods in their previous world. The king believes it and decides to ask about his training with the rescue squad. Usato looks at Rose again, thinking that's hard to answer. Yet he claims that it's way too easy. The king is happy to hear it, but Rose smirks at Usato. He starts to panic and realizes that's what she wants him to answer. He realizes that his mind has been pressured by Rose and feels frustrated. Yet, the king announces that Suzyum's training will be modified and asks her to rest for the day. The two are dismissed, but Rose and Siglis are asked to stay behind. Usato is confused, but he's forced to leave. Suzyum asks if something is wrong, and he replies that he's wondering about the subject they're talking about because the minister seemed worried. Suzyum confirms, and Usato worries that he might get fired. She laughs it out and suddenly stops after hearing Kazuki's voice. Kazuki immediately complains about Usato being too casual after being attacked by monsters and going missing. Usato apologizes, and the princess explains that Kazuki wanted to look for them. Suzyum calls him reckless, but Usato mentions she's the same after being bitten by a poisonous monkey. Kazuki is confused, and Usato tries to explain, but Suzyum stops him. They head outside, and Kazuki reveals Rose's claims that there was no need to worry because Usato was with Suzyum. He mentions those words calmed him down, but Usato knows that Rose was thinking that he was having it on easy mode when compared to training. Kazuki is impressed because Rose completely trusts Usato. Yet Usato thinks that Kazuki is just a pure and innocent guy. He places his hand on his shoulder, asking him to never change. After all, only he and Suzume need to be corrupted. Kazuki doesn't understand it, but accepts the deal. Suzume, however, starts to complain because he just called her tainted. Later, Usato and Suzume leave, and the princess mentions how close they look together. Kazuki confirms, mentioning they are getting pretty close lately. Yet, the princess corrects him, mentioning they're close to him. She mentions how he was enjoying himself while hanging with them. Kazuki dismisses it by mentioning they were friends before. The princess gets worried and asks if she can also be Kazuki's friend. She mentions that Suzume treats her informally, but Kazuki never calls her by her name. Upon noticing his surprised reaction, the princess apologizes and tells him to not force himself. Kazuki then grows a pair and promises to call her Cilia from now on. Meanwhile, in the throne room, the king reveals he interrogated the bandits who attacked Usato's group. In short, the bandits were crossing the plains and noticed fewer monsters than usual, and that's when they were attacked by a herd of fall boars in the forest. The king thinks the monsters must be fleeing the plains for the forest, and that can only mean the monsters are running away from something that is coming towards the kingdom. Siglis thinks it's the Demon Lord's army, and the king confirms it. Siglis then mentions the Demon Lord underestimated them in their previous battle, but the same won't happen again. He believes the Demon Lord will use everything available to capture their kingdom. The king confirms and asks him to tell all commanding officers to be prepared to mobilize the troops at any time. Siglis confirms and starts walking away. The king then decides to talk to Rose in private. He apologizes for the wait and reveals that he must ask her for something. He explains that he normally cannot assign this mission to the captain of the rescue squad, but Rose replies that he doesn't need to worry about it. She knows he wants her to scout and locate the location of the Demon Lord's army. The king confirms and apologizes for the request. She dismisses the apology because she knows she's the fastest person in the kingdom. She prepares to leave, but the king reveals he has something else to talk about. He steps down from his throne and asks if she wants to return to her position as the battalion commander. Yet Rose refuses to, mentioning that she bears more guilt than he thinks she does. The king thinks she's too hard on herself and mentions she was the first healer to ever be appointed as a battalion commander. However, Rose replies that it's simply the truth. He asks if she has ever forgiven herself, and she denies it. Her eyes become filled with rage as she asks how she could ever forget it. She was forced to accept the deaths of all her subordinates and the fact that she couldn't revive them. And the scar on her right, I will never enable her to forget them. The king tries to convince her that she shouldn't bear this burden, but she replies that it's something she must do. Her subordinates only died because she was full of herself. However, that made her realize that it's all over when someone is dead, no matter how skilled or trustworthy they are. And that scar is a punishment that will never let her forget about her sins. She reveals that was the origin of her decision to create the rescue squad. They don't fight, they save lives. The king confirms by stating they saved many men during the battle 2 years ago. He asks her if she hasn't reached her goal, but Rose reveals there's another reason why the squad exists. The king is curious and asks what's the reason. Rose reveals that her ultimate goal is to find a subordinate who will not die. The king feels stupid because that's something impossible. Yet Rose explains that's the reason for her hellish training. She's been looking for someone who can use healing magic, someone who's determined to push past his physical limits, and someone with the determination to never give up. She's been looking for someone who has all of these traits. The king realizes Usato is just like that, Rose confirms, mentioning he's everything she's been looking for. He has insane survival instincts, adaptability, and the will to survive. She mentions that his best trait is that he hates to lose, and his worst one is that he can be easily influenced. Yet, no matter what she does, he still gets back up and stands up to her. She knows he will never give up and reminds him of the guys she lost. She reveals that she's determined to make him the strongest healer. She realizes that she spoke too much and apologizes. She decides to focus on the mission instead, and the king puts his confidence on her. Later at night, Usato finds a letter and asks about it. The squad member explains Rose left it for him before leaving. Usato thinks this is bad news and sits down to open it. He finds out that he doesn't need to train the next day and that he should deliver another letter to someone. Usato then asks where Rose went, but nobody knows. She simply told them that she was going out and wouldn't return for dinner. Meanwhile, the Demon Lord's army is trying to make a bridge to cross the river. The Black Knight sighs, making the commander question what's wrong. The Black Knight thinks it's quite annoying to see the commander's excitement about all of this. The commander gets angry, complaining that this isn't the way to talk to a superior, but the Black Knight bluntly apologizes, mentioning they're literally the same rank. The commander mentions she doesn't care because she's the one in charge and the Black Knight should follow orders. The Black Knight apologizes and walks away, asking to be informed when the bridge is completed. Four Eyes Weirdo mentions how the commander is struggling but tells him to do something. He tells her that he's giving moral support and that the bridge construction is going fine. The commander confirms it and mentions that in a few hours they will start their invasion. Yet suddenly someone mentions there is someone on the other side of the river. She thinks it's just a scout and couldn't care less because it will be too late to return to the kingdom and inform what's going on. Suddenly, a tree is thrown into the bridge that is being constructed. It completely destroys it, shocking the commander, who doesn't understand what's going on. But upon looking closely, she notices Rose standing on the other side and shouts her name. Rose smiles, thinking she was supposed to only scout, but she managed to delay the invasion by some days. The next day, Usato follows Rose's map to deliver the letter. Yet he notices everyone is looking and commenting about him. He doesn't understand why, because he didn't bring Blurrin with him, but everyone is confused about why is Usato walking instead of running. He then meets the old lady, who asks where Blurrin is and if he wants to buy some fruits. Usato confirms it and mentions that he will be picking it up on his way back. He finally manages to find the place on the map and steps inside. A girl comes to greet him and upon noticing his clothes, asks if he's the person who just joined the rescue squad. Usato confirms, but she interrupts him by mentioning that her brother already told her his name. Yet every time she tries, she guesses it wrong. Usato tells her his name and she then introduces herself as Yururu Fleur, Orga's sister. She then welcomes him to their clinic and Usato asks where is Orga. She reveals he's inside examining a patient and convinces him to peek inside. Usato doesn't know if they should be doing it, but she reveals that Orga needs to concentrate. They watch Orga use his healing magic on a kid, and Usato notices that his healing magic color is intense and smooth, which is the exact opposite of his. Organa finishes healing the kid, who gets up and tells his mother that he doesn't feel sick anymore. The mother thanks Orga, but the kid asks him why people are watching. Upon noticing it's Usato, Orga ends the deal and they talk. Orga thanks him for delivering Rose's letter, but Usato dismisses it, mentioning that he always wanted to visit the clinic. Yururu then asks how everyone in the squad is doing. He confirms it's always the same thing, and she laughs it out, mentioning how she misses them. Orga starts reading the letter while Yururu tells Usato that she and her brother couldn't keep up with the training. She still feels bad because Rose has put everything into training them, but things didn't work out. Everyone was initially excited, but the training was so hard that they became afraid of Rose. She mentions that Rose was desperate at that time. Usato is confused by those words, but Yururu explains that Rose seems much happier right now. He thinks that's only because she managed to find a new punching bag. Suddenly, someone comes into the clinic to ask for Orga's help because someone fell from a roof while fixing it and injured 2 other people. Usato joins the siblings and they reach the location. Orga thinks they need to treat them urgently and asks Usato to take care of someone. They quickly rush to their patients and Usato treats a guy with a broken, bleeding leg. He thinks that he only healed basic injuries on himself, Orga, and Suzyum before. However, if war breaks out, he will have to treat injuries more severe than this in the middle of the battle. He knows that he trained for that moment, yet he's still unsure. Orga notices this and tells him to calm down. He explains it doesn't matter who or where he's treating because he has the power to heal them. He tells Usato that he believes in him, and Usato remembers Kazuki mentioning that Rose believes in him. He finally makes up his mind and decides to believe in himself. He focuses on his magic and quickly heals the leg of the injured guy. While returning to the clinic, Orga thanks him for helping, but Usato is unsure if he did a good job. Yururu confirms it, mentioning the patient was surprised to not feel more pain. Orga uses this chance to ask Usato to drop by the clinic when he has time and help them. Usato takes the offer and decides to leave. While saying goodbye, Yururu mentions that Orga looked cool while advising Usato. He then reveals that Rose's letter is a summoning for them to join the war against the Demon Lord's army. He then explains that Usato doesn't have any real experience and can only rely on his abilities. Yururu realizes the war is about to start and feels sad. Meanwhile, Usato manages to get the fruit from the old lady when he's suddenly stopped by a girl with fox ears. He's confused and asks if she's lost. She replies that he's the only one who can see it and the only person who can change the future. He notices the girl's eyes changing colors and starts watching images of the war. In those images, the Demon Lord's army is winning. He then sees Suzume and Kazuki losing their lives to the Black Knight. Usato returns to reality, completely shocked, and the girl replies that he must repay her in the future.